are at Sam Ash Music in San Antonio, Texas, July the 17th, 2012, and we're about to see Thomas Lang play drums. One of the best drummers in the whole world, Mr. Thomas Lang, is playing drums live at Sam Ash Music. And you just got a picture with him a moment ago, didn't you? Yeah, and fortunately you didn't do that.
Okay, so let's get this party going. You ready? Okay, this guy needs no introduction. He's one of the greatest drummers on the planet. He's an animal, he's a great guy, and he's going to give it up for San Antonio. So give it up for Thomas Lang!
Thank you.
Okay. Almost there.
It wasn't my fault. I didn't do it, I swear.
That was such an awesome instrumental. We start over on it.
1, 2, 1, 2.
Are we up and running again?
I believe we are up and running again, and we're going to...
No. No. Hey, 1, 2, 1, 2.
Hello, San Antonio. Oh yeah. That was just a test, okay? Now here comes the real deal. Thank you all for coming. I'll be playing a few songs from my band Stork. Yeah. It's a heavy instrumental trio with Shane Gibson on guitar, who's also in Korn. And this first song I'll be playing again. It's called Ducks in a Pond. Thank you very much. 1, 2, 1, 2. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you all for coming, first of all. And thank you, Sam Ash, and thank you, Roland, for inviting me. Big hand for Roland and the new Planet X. Isn't that awesome? I think so. Absolutely. Again, thanks for coming out and for supporting drum events like this. It's awesome. Yes, thank you. I just want to say a couple of things about the gear I'm using. This is a TD30, the new flagship Roland V-drum set. I use one brain, one module, one sound module. It's maxed out with inputs, but I don't use any out of the norm custom stuff. It's all complete factory gear. In fact, it is a kit from the store, isn't it, Tim?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is. You could buy this kit, right, Tim? Yeah. Now it's of course worthless because I played on it, but it's all standard stuff. Maxed out with inputs. I use also the additional 4 auxiliary inputs for a few extra components that I brought along, which are one KD7 to my right. The KD7 is a little trigger pedal doodad. It's portable, it's light, it feels great. The beater hits down, so it's really solid. Doesn't move, there's no wobbling or any other issues. So I use one KD7 over here and one over here. My setup is usually much larger, but we couldn't bring all the stuff here this time. I use usually 6 pedals on my right and 6 on my left. So today I only have 5, I think, yes. I know, it's almost impossible to work with under these circumstances. But anyways, but I use a bunch of these KD7s usually. Because they're small and portable and you can basically line them up right next to each other in a nice semicircle and play really coolly. It'd be even cooler if I had 6 on each side. Anyways, but you can do a lot of really cool things with these. So I used 2 KD7s. I brought an extra cymbal over here, and I brought a closed hi-hat instead of my 4th floor tom or 4th tom. I use a closed hi-hat, and of course I brought a second kick drum. Why? Exactly. Thank you very much. Free T-shirt for this gentleman, please, Tim. Okay.
You said that?
Exactly.
Okay, right here.
There you go.
You got it? Boom!
Bam! Wow. Impressive. No, he cannot. But anyways, of course I use it because it looks cool, and also it's more work for Tim, so it's a win-win. And but it's because I prefer the feel of it, and I like the look, of course, but I really much prefer hearing and feeling the sound and the impact on my left side. So I use 2 kick drums, everything else completely standard. I tweaked some of the presets a little bit because of my additional components. Not, any sound modification or anything like that. I just tweaked and dialed up some new instruments for the extra components I brought. Everything you're hearing are factory sounds, basically. And those sounds are pretty impressive. The kits feel really, really awesome and totally natural. With this new TD30, they have a thing called the supernatural sounds. And it's basically that amazing natural response and feel that you had on the TD20, only on steroids. I don't know how else to explain it. Check this out. I don't know if you can see this, but I'm just bouncing my stick on the snare. It's pretty impressive, Thank you very much. Just fingers. It's really super sensitive, and it translates exactly what you're doing with your sticks or fingers or brushes. You can use brushes on these, yes you can. It's pretty impressive. So check it out if you can. It's not cheap, but it's worth every penny. And it's, of course, you get what you pay for, and these things are absolutely awesome. So for anybody who's a professional musician, you need one, no question about that. And well, it's true, because there are no alternatives in my opinion. And if you're a young drummer starting out, or if you're a hobby drummer, this is great for a kid at home when you don't have a soundproof room and you want to practice late at night after work or whatever. You put your cans on and suddenly you're in Dodger Stadium in your head. So it's pretty impressive, and they feel great. And TD30. So the brand new kit. I use DW pedals, all 9000 series. I like the way they feel, and also they look cool. Everything else, totally standard. My sticks are Thomas Lang model Big Firth sticks. And that's that. If you guys have any questions about the gear or any techniques or any of the songs I played or anything in general, just shoot and I'll be happy to answer, maybe demo a few things. Yes, please.
There's a lot of drummers out in the working world that say that using electronic drums is cheating in some sense. You as a professional endorsing these, what do you have to say about that? Electronics versus acoustic?
Well, I hear that question a lot. I don't know. I don't understand that cheating.
Well, that they're not real drums.
Okay.
They're electronic drums versus acoustic drums.
Well, you know what? My answer is always, why don't you ask Chick Corea or Herbie Hancock? Why don't they choose between a synthesizer and a grand piano? It's a completely different instrument in that sense. Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea would never give up playing grand piano simply because a Yamaha DX7 exists. You know what I mean? And it's the same with the electronic drums. It's the 21st century, and about 97% of all music produced today is produced on computers using electronic sounds, sequences, drum loops, whatever. It's all about electronics today. And this is a way for us drummers to play drums, but to play a synthesizer with drumsticks and to produce the sounds that you need to have in today's music scene without compromise. You can't just, in the professional world, simulate, a 808 kick drum. If I play this beat, okay, say the record that you're touring with Lady Gaga, okay? And Lady Gaga's latest single sounds like this. Okay? You can't show up there and go, Okay, and that's the reality of it. If you don't have the 808 kick drum sound, it's a different song immediately. You know, the sound quality of the song is such a big part of the composition. There's a lot of songs when you hear the first 2 beats on the drum set, you're like, oh, Phil Collins. You know, you recognize the drum sound, and it's the same with, you know, pretty much every song out there today. So you can't just simulate, you know, the original sounds. You have to actually replicate them one to one. It has to be the exact same sound. In order to trigger those sounds, you need a great, comfortable way to play these things. And this is by far the most natural, because these are actual drums. They have tunable heads. You know, if you don't like the head tension, you tune it. And you change the tension of the head. And it feels great, like a real natural drum set. I'm going to turn the sound off here. And you can hear pitches. You know, you can play it like a real drum set. It feels absolutely natural and no different. And this is by far the best way to replicate these electronic sounds without compromise. You know, everything else is a compromise. So there's the question, you know, acoustic drums versus electronic drums should never be asked. You know, and my answer is, of course, always both. You can't just do one thing. You know, you're limiting yourself as a musician, as a professional, you know, from a creative point of view, on many levels. So you always have to have both. Whether you're professional, well, especially if you're a professional musician. If you're just a hobby drummer and you don't want to travel a half an hour to your soundproof rehearsal space, why don't you get one of these? You know, you save rental on your rehearsal space, you save a lot of practice time commuting back and forth. You can practice at home, you have a gazillion sounds at your disposal. You can play along to sequences, you can play, you know, to music, you can record on it. Go for it, you know? So I don't understand the point at all. These are usually people who either are afraid of electronics, you know, they think because it has buttons and knobs, it's just way too advanced for them. Or they're really not understanding the whole point of having more instruments at your disposal to be creative and to work professionally. So
I use one for my gigs, but I get a lot of that. You know,
right.
I'm playing a rock band.
Right, yeah.
So
Yeah.
I guess you're right.
And you know, the point is, no drummer will ever give up acoustic drums. You know, because acoustic drums are like a grand piano. But electronic drums are like all the synthesizers out there. And you simply can't produce a lot of sound, most sounds, just on a piano. Piano has one sound. And a great, amazing drum set has one sound. You know, even if you tweak it and tune it and mic it and it's EQ'd and everything, that is the drum sound. There's one sound. Here I can go, you know, play a rock beat. And you know, 2 minutes later, or seconds later, I'm a completely different dude suddenly, you know, so and that's impossible to do. And simply because of that, electronic drums will always be there, you know, in the forefront of today's professional scene, no question.
Yes.
Yes, sir. I'm glad to be here, and you're very impressive. This
Thank
is
you.
my very first time. I've never heard of you, but I'm glad that I'm here. I'm a percussionist myself. I'd like to know, where did you get your training from?
Well, I had really great teachers when I first started out. I started out when I was 5, and I grew up in Austria, in Vienna in Austria, and I had a classical education, exactly. So my first teacher was the chair of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra. So he was a classically trained percussionist and a very, very good teacher. And so I think I was with him for about 7 years, and then I studied music at the Conservatory and the Music Academy in Vienna, and then took loads of private lessons with people, and just I guess most of the work I did myself. I just whatever, you know, inspired me. You know, my big idols were always, you know, in the early days, Buddy Rich and Ringo Starr, and then I got into Tony Williams, Billy Cobham, you know, Max Roach, all the great jazz drummers, everybody from, you know, Peter Erskine to Jeff Hamilton, and you know, all the greats, and of course all the big rock drummers. And I stole from everybody and just merged it all into my playing and try to get inspiration from every style of music and every drummer out there.
I'm very impressive.
Thank you.
For being here.
Thank you. Yes, please.
how do you go about your practice regimen, like going from basic techniques to advanced?
How do I go about my practicing?
Your practice regimen, like as far as everything you've done tonight, how would
Let me just do one thing first. Can we put the mics in my monitor? Is that possible? Yeah, all of them, both. I can't hear you.
I'm going to serenade you with my voice now. Is that cool?
Drums too loud.
Okay, am I good?
1 second. He's gonna put your voice in my monitor. Can you say something?
1, 2.
Louder, please.
Hey.
Louder.
Hello.
Louder.
Hey.
I said louder. Yeah. Not you. Look at that. I've got drums in there too. Okay, anyway, sorry. Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay, how do you go about your practice regimen? Like going from basic techniques to advanced techniques?
You mean in the same session?
Pretty much, I guess just on your off time to prepare for any clinics, shows, bands, or anything like.
Do you want to know what I do in my off time?
Okay, well, I don't know.
It's not practicing. Okay. Well, you know, when I practice, and I unfortunately don't have time enough to practice as much as I would like or practice at all. And it's been like that for probably more than 10 years for sure. So when I used to practice on a regular basis, I had a very strict practice log, a diary, if you like, practice diary. I had a very, very organized practice schedule and practice material. So to get back to my first teacher, one of the best things that anybody's ever done to me in my life is my first teacher taught me how to practice before he taught me how to play. So for the first weeks when I was 5, he taught me how to practice. Because you know, most musicians never learn how to practice correctly. And it's a trial and error situation. After 20 years, you kind of figure out what works, but by that point, you've wasted 20 years of valuable practice time, okay? Here's something that I always showcase at this point, and I'll get back to your question after this. But I always had a very, very organized practice life, if you like. Let me find something here. And I didn't just randomly switch from basic technique to advanced technique or this exercise and then play it by ear and do whatever comes to mind. I always planned what to practice, and I always practiced everything according to the most basic practice rules, which my first teacher taught me. Being, never practice when you play, never play when you practice. Practice like you play. Don't practice till it's done. And all these basic rules, which there are many of, and I can break down for you if you like. But rule number 1, which saved me years and years of practice time, is never play when you practice, never practice when you play. And I shall demonstrate what that means, okay? So you hear this in every rehearsal room all over the world. Okay, here, you know, Joe in San Antonio is in his rehearsal space, and I'm sitting outside, and he wants to practice, you know, a salsa rhythm. He wants to play clave with the left foot, rumba clave, and he wants to play cascare, bongo. That's what he wants to practice, okay? And what you hear outside of his room is this. True story. You get the idea. So, and in reality, and all of us are guilty of this, I'm sure, you waste about 50% of your practice time noodling around. I call it noodling, okay? Because it's really nothing. It's jamming, it's kind of playing, it's basically just stroking your ego, telling yourself, oh, I don't really I'm not really that terrible. I can actually play some stuff. So you always play a little bit of something to make it feel good about your level as a player, and you completely waste your practice time, 50% of it. So if you eliminate that noodling from your dedicated practice time and schedule, and dedicate time to noodling, which is being creative and deliberately, getting out of that practice mindset, it's much, much more efficient. And so my first teacher taught me that, and saving 50% of your practice time every time you practice adds up, because over 10 years, that's 5 years, So over 20 years, that's 10 years of your practice time wasted, not dedicated to working creatively or to working, in a regimented way practicing. So I was very lucky that he taught me that from day one, and that made a huge difference for me. So when I practice, or used to practice, I practiced a very strict regime of certain things for a certain amount of time at a certain tempo, and I took notes of everything every day, and I wrote down today, started at 9:15, practiced exercise 27B, which I had in a folder, and that was, I don't know, double paradiddles with my feet or some crazy stuff. And then I practiced that for 45 minutes at 104 BPM. And then whenever I practiced something at the end of my session with that exercise, I wrote down comments. Was great, easy, felt great today, left foot is miserable, whatever. Any kind of comments, and over time it gives you a really good idea of where you stand and what you have to work on. And the one thing I always worked on was my weakest points. So that's something I could recommend to you as a general rule. Learn something new every day. Don't stop learning until it's done, until you can apply it in a playing situation. Never play when you practice, as in never noodle when you practice. And never practice when you play means when you're out with your band and you're jamming, and you're playing and performing or rehearsing, don't play things that you haven't practiced, because they won't work. It's as simple as that. It's usually the rule. Because when you're out on a gig with your band and you want to bust out the crazy chops because you think you're cool now on stage, and you're not using your gear, and it's hot, and the sound isn't good, and you're jet lagged, or you've got a toothache, whatever it is, it's not going to work, no matter what. Okay, so that means don't practice when you play. Anyway, so I stuck to those rules mostly, and saved a lot of time that way. Yes. Thank you.
Question. I've seen a lot of different, instructions on how to master like molar technique, and wanted to see if you had any tips on that.
That thing?
Yes.
Well, I don't know. I used to play traditional grip all the time for many years. I stopped playing traditional grip about 2 years ago. I just kind of busted out sometimes to flatter drummers like you guys. I try to play it again, but I haven't practiced it for years, and I stopped playing this way altogether. But when I used to play this, what it is it's a combination of forearm rotation, finger strokes, as in Gladstone technique, and German grip wrist strokes. So it's really a hybrid technique that is based on bounce and rebound, okay? As in bounce, okay? I'll play, for example, the most basic molar exercise is Stone Killer number 3, which is a triplet exercise with one accent, a tap, and a lift. So I'll play one stroke, the stick bounces off the drum. After the stroke, I throw it back onto the drum with the same energy. The rebound is the energy I use to tap the stick back down a second time. I'm not playing a stroke, I'm just letting it bounce back. And then I lift the stick from the lowest point with the butt end up. What happens when I lift it with the butt end up is the tip touches the head. Okay? So I'll go stroke, tap, lift. Stroke, tap, lift. Stroke. And I just repeat that. And I'm playing one stroke. You see my arm, my wrist is completely still after the first stroke. That's the molar stroke, the most basic technique. And all you do is you speed this up. And do the same thing with the left hand. You play traditional grip? Matched, okay. I used to practice it with traditional grip because it's old school. It's a little different with the left hand because you turn your hand outwards. but that's basically it. The best way to play strings of singles with accents. All other techniques are designed to play only strings of notes without accents, like, for example, finger control technique. It's just this. Just using fingers, no wrist at all. Okay? No wrist. Or Gladstone technique, which is using a combination of fingers and a little bit of wrist, you know. And you can play some, you know, fast notes with this technique without any sort of muscular effort. So it's good for certain things, but you can't play accents. The only way you can play accents comfortably is using American grip, molded strokes. You know, it's marching style. So, there you go. And there it is. Thank you.
This is actually my 2-year-old. He had a rudimentary. Okay.
Okay.
No, I was noticing that on the bass drum, you have, you know, speaking of rudiments, you have wonderful technique in keeping time, using sometimes your heel on the ground, so it looks like a heel toe with doing like a 5-stroke roll, and sometimes it looks like you're doing a shuffle. So
Yeah.
when do you decide that you want to put the heel down in certain very fast rolling types of maneuvers, and when do you prefer shuffling?
The decision comes with, you know, the level of comfort. If I find that one or the other is more comfortable for something, then I'll use the one or the other. So I try to adjust my technique according to the energy level and input required. So if I play just, you know, a short burst of 30-second notes or something, like a 5-stroke roll, for example, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right, left, right, left, right. You know, if it's just a short thing like this, I would just leave my heel down, you know. Heel down. So I use that because it's comfortable that way. I don't have to lift my legs up to play those short bursts. Okay. Also, I choose the technique according to the sound I want to get. You know, if I want to play an accented stroke, I would tend to lift my leg up, my heel up, and drop the weight of my leg into the pedal. For loud strokes, and for subdivisions, softer strokes, and unmuffled strokes, I would always play heel down. So, in order to play dynamic patterns with my feet, which is what I do most of the time, I switch between the two. And it's like using fingers and wrists for accents. It's like using, I use the whole forearm and my wrist for the accent, and the subdivisions I play just with fingers. The same with my feet. So if I play an accent, I drop the weight of my leg into the pedal, or if I want to play all loud strokes, it's all knees in the air, like jogging on your pedal, basically. And if it's faster strokes, I would play ankle strokes, which means the knees not moving. If you look at my knees, see my knees are moving up and down. At faster strokes, they're not moving. So I switch between stomping and ankle strokes, and heel down strokes for unmuffled strokes and for less energy. And I combine the three basically, as for example, when I play a rudiment, like let's say a paradiddle, I use an accent for the quarter note. So, paradiddle, parad. Or double paradiddle, I go. You can see I lift the heel up for the accent. So, you know, always for the accent. I would lift the heel up, drop the weight of my leg, and subdivision I'll play heel down. It's the only way you can play bass drum dynamically, using a combination of heel up and heel down. It makes no sense to lift your heels up and play quiet. Why? You know, it's like trying to play quiet from here. You know. So, makes no sense. And I use a lot of ankle strokes. For example, great exercise to switch between stomping and ankle strokes is to play 60 notes stomped with the whole weight of your leg, and then 30-second notes for 2 quarter notes using ankle strokes. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2. And so on. So you learn to switch between the two. And one thing I always used to practice as a warm-up thing was to play triplets using 1 heel up stroke and 2 heel down strokes. Right foot is heel up, left foot heel down. And then on the 4 of each bar, I switch. Now play the left one, heel up, right, left, right, left. Yeah? And that way you train to play, to switch between the two techniques with each foot. And that allows you eventually to play, instead of just going, just hammering out 60 notes, you can play actually dynamic patterns. Thank you.
I guess back to practice. Some of my favorite drummers are like Bernard Purdy, Steve Gadd, some of those kind of cats.
Steve who?
Gadd.
Say again?
Gadd.
I like him too. Yeah.
When you practice, do you separate the chops world from the pocket world, or is it all one big thing?
I do separate, yes, I do. Absolutely. To me, they have nothing to do with each other. And,
right.
You know, the drum thing, and I have sort of become famous in the drumming world for being sort of the chops monster guy. And whether I like it or not, I do enjoy playing technical and crazy stuff for drummers. But that has nothing to do really with my career as a musician at all. So I deliberately try to keep the two worlds and two sort of avenues of my career completely separate, and I also separate completely my mind between playing technical and spectacular kind of fireworks drummy stuff and working. They have nothing to do with each other. All the stuff that I do when I work is completely undrummy. And I like playing simple music. It's my favorite stuff and style to play. And I produce a lot of music, so, and I always have, you know, so I always looked at making music and producing and writing music from a very different angle, never from a drum sort of angle. And when I'm not in a room full of drummers like here, I actually, I dislike most of the super technical stuff. Right. I have, you know, my own projects and bands where I sort of find an outlet for this kind of playing style with Stork, for example, but that's pretty much as far as it goes. Right. I separate completely, and I concentrate mainly on the other side, on the very simple and basic playing. Yeah. Yes. Thank you.
Then I have a question.
Yes, please. Shoot.
Can you give us a breakdown or a very elongated demonstration of your stick tricks?
Very elongated?
Yes, sir. Please.
Okay, very elongated. Now, where to start? I have to move my mic stand first. Okay. Now, the thing is, you know, ironically, this whole stick, I don't even know where to start. It became such a thing that, you know, people associated me for some reason with the stick tricks because it was on one of my DVDs. And you know, the reason why it ended up on the DVD was because we had 15 or 20 more minutes of reel, and we wanted to fill it up with something. So when we were shooting the DVD, we were done, and I was done with the songs. I didn't have any more additional stuff, and they said, "Come on, we've got 50 more minutes, you know, on our you know, memory here. So just do some more solos or something." I'm like, "Come on, it's an instructional thing. I don't want to do any more solos, you know. It's besides the point, you know." And I don't know, maybe we can, let me think, maybe, you know, I was sitting there twirling sticks, and they're like, "Try some of that, talk about that." Okay. So we added that stick trick section simply to fill up the space, you know, of memory that we had. And it became a whole thing. And I've been trying to not do that, especially in I'm happy to, but like in real playing situations, because you have to be very careful with this, because it can look, you know, it can look great and fun and entertaining in the right context, but it can also look really goofy and weird. You know, if you're, for example, best example, check this out. Okay, here we go. You know what I mean? So depends very much on the musical environment, but having said that, in the right situation, you know, it's kind of cool when you do something like this, for example. You know. You know what I mean? So, anyways, what I do, the things that I use are all marching based, really. So I use a lot of sort of phony twirls like this one, or real twirls like that one. I use tosses, backsticking. And I started, when I grew up in Vienna, I studied Basler drums. It's a style of drumming from Basel. It's sort of the style that all the rudimental sort of US marching drumming is based on. It comes from Switzerland, a place in Switzerland called Basel. And I studied Basler drumming, and there's a lot of interesting things in there. For example, backsticking, which is, of course, I'm sure you know, switching from left-hand traditional to right-hand traditional. So. Okay? And a good way to get into that is to start with one hand, playing tip, 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 butt, 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 tip, tip, butt, butt, tip, butt, tip, butt, and things like that. So tip, 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 butt, 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 okay? Like in 16 notes. Or two each, tip, tip, butt, butt, tip, tip, butt, butt. You have to hold the stick right in the middle like this. Whether you play traditional grip or match grip doesn't matter. It's the same, because you switch back and forth. So grab it in the middle of the stick, that's very important, so you have, you know, enough stick left on either side to play comfortably. And it's a really awkward way to play, to hit the drum pulling it down like this, you know, pulling the stick down. But that's just the way it is. Okay, and a good exercise is to go tip, tip, butt, butt, and then instead of playing 60 notes with the right hand, you play 60-note triplets, the second and third of a triplet. So 1 triplet, 2 triplet, 1 triplet, 2 triplet. Okay, same with the right hand. Left hand. Or both hands. So I use a lot of these because you can do a lot of stuff with this. You can use it not just like on the snare drum as for like rudimental, but you can use it on the toms or on the cymbals. I use things like the helicopter, which is a three-point turn where you play. It comes from the traditional grip position, tip, palm down, matched. So you go tip, palm down, matched, tip, palm down, matched. Do this. And again, fill with 16 of triplets, for example. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 3-point turn. Same with the right hand, of course. You can do it stick and stick even. You know, I use that sometimes. Or I use things like, same thing, of course, with the right hand. I use twirls like this one. I'm sure you all know it. I call it the poser twirl because it's not really I mean, it is a twirl, but it's not, you're not really twirling the stick between your fingers. You're holding it between index finger and middle finger, and you're basically just wobbling your hand like that. And you kind of, you know, drop the stick from, you know, the tip from 12 o'clock down to 6 o'clock and bring it back up to 12, like so. And then you grab it with your little finger, ring finger, and thumb after one rotation. If you're Tommy Lee, you do more than one rotation. You do, and you point at somebody and you're yelling, going, yeah! But, so you can do more than one, of course, with both hands. Or you can just do one and end on a stroke, which is what I like to do. Okay, so you can do this, for example. You can do 1, 1. Or I use it like on offbeats. You know? So I use that one with both hands. Without a microphone stand, it's much easier. But what I also use are things like tosses. You know, I use different twirls. I use this twirl, for example. And it's very easy, simple. It's basically, I start in a 12 o'clock position, for example. Tip points at 12 o'clock. And I roll it around my middle finger back to 12. And then I rotate it back. So it goes from 12 to 12 and back, backwards and forwards. I don't do any more than one full rotation because if you rotate more than once in the same direction, you eventually run out of stick. Because you move towards the end of the stick, you know, when you keep going in one direction. So I rotate forwards and backwards, always. But in order to create this amazing illusion of the stick rotating in one direction, I came up with this amazing trick. And of course, when I rotate the stick backwards, I just rotate my wrist. So it looks like it's still going in the same direction. I know, it's genius, isn't it? So it's an optical illusion, you know. But anyways, that's one of the things that I use. That way I always stay in the same position on the stick. And it's a fairly secure grip. And you can, you know, make it look funky. Thank you. The thing is, you have to, before you do any of this stuff, it's good to learn to play ambidextrously because you have to know when you're twirling here, you have to play with this hand. And vice versa, when you're twirling here, you have to play with this hand. And you have to make it look like you're not doing that. So that's an important thing to learn. You have to, for example, when you do this, not so cool, right? You can't stop playing when you're twirling. So when you're twirling here, and then you have to play the hi-hat with the left hand. But of course, you're always looking at the hand that's twirling because you want to distract the people. You know? You're always looking at that hand, you're putting it high up in the air, so everybody's looking at this, and they don't notice that you're playing with that hand. You know? And same with this. So before you do any cool fancy twirling, it's best to learn play everything with both hands. Leading with the left hand. And with the right. Same beats. Because you have to twirl here. You know, so you have to learn everything both ways. And whatever lick it is that you're playing, you have to learn everything with both hands. That's important. I also use certain tosses, like this, for example. Move this thing. Or this one. So, thank you. So there's a lot of stuff, and again, you know, be careful with the musical context, because again, you know, it can be really kind of cool and entertaining, and just some visual spice to your performance, but it can also look really out of place and bizarre. So best is to use it in moderation. Yes. Yes, please.
Your band, Stork, do you have any of the CDs here?
No, I forgot completely. I promised to bring, but I completely forgot. It was too early this morning.
Where's the best place to get them?
You can get it online. Best place is to buy it from me online. Go to musomart.com. I have a record label.
Music Mart?
Muso, M-U-S-O, Mart, as in Walmart, musomart.com. And we have all the swag and the shirts and the DVDs and the books and the CDs and a lot of my stuff on there.
Hey, Thomas.
Yes.
Right here.
Over there.
Longtime fan. I think I
Thank
saw
you.
you drop a stick. So
Impossible.
Apparently it actually does happen to the best of us.
It happens all the time.
I'm a left-hander. So for me, everything goes the other direction. That's kept me out of a lot of jam situations where there was already a drum kit in place, but it was always set up righty.
Right.
At your level, do you find that you have abandoned favoring one side or the other? Are you equally competent on both sides?
I try to be. I'm not equally competent. Some things come easier with the right or with the left, it depends. Also with the feet it's different for some reason. But I try to be completely ambidextrous, yes. I mean, I try to play hi-hat with the left. I do a lot of playing with my left foot. So I play everything I play with the right foot. You know. Also with the left foot, also with the left hand. You know, so I try to switch everything, and there's been tours where I played everything lefty because it was simple music and I wanted to play left-handed. So I switch it up and I try to achieve the same level of skill with both sides. But I am naturally left-handed, so I play golf left-handed and I do a lot of things left-handed. So maybe it's me, but to me it feels pretty balanced on either side. I actually, you know, I like playing open-handed. Prefer this actually. It's much more natural than this, of course, you know. So, but I still try to even out inconsistencies and get to the same level of skill with both sides. It's probably a never-ending story because there's a natural sort of tendency to play certain things leading with the one or the other hand, and it also depends very much on your setup configuration because, you know, I have certain instruments on my right, you know, which are usually lower, bigger drums, lower sounds. So for certain downbeats and things, you want to lead with your right hand, and it comes very natural that way. So it depends very much on your configuration. But, you know, it's probably never going to be exactly the same for me. But I'm trying to have both sides be equally strong. Yeah. Yes, please.
Since you brought up the idea of strong, could you address your fitness regimen and your hearing protection?
Mine? Sorry?
Exactly. What?
But, well, the fitness, I just try to stay fit, reasonably fit, no matter, it doesn't really have all that much to do with playing drums. I just try to stay fit simply because, it's good for you, I think, and of course, I'm vain, so I don't want to not look fairly decent. So, I try to stay fit, but I would if I was a banker or a garbage man, so it doesn't matter. It's simply something, I think I can recommend to everybody. Whatever it is that you do, I can recommend trying to stay fit. But it's nothing that I do militantly. I don't work out 5 times a week or something at all. I do everything in total moderation. I run a lot, do a lot of cardio. I used to do much more fitness-related things, but I don't have the time for it. But it's good to stay fit. And hearing, I use in-ears. I'm very, very careful with my hearing all the time. I've used in-ears for many, many years, and I'm allergic to loud noise, and especially loud music. And I know it's ironic, but when you work professionally, you're exposed to this every day for hours and hours and hours. And when I'm near a drummer and they, hit a snare drum rim shot in my immediate presence, I freak out. I'm super allergic to loud noise. It's something that comes with the territory, I guess. And I've been playing for over 40 years. So after a long time, you have to be very careful with your hearing. So I use in-ears. I make sure that when I work in the studio every day, I produce music and write a lot of music, so I always make sure that the speakers aren't too loud, that people aren't listening back to, tracking at a higher level. And as soon as I sit down behind acoustic drums, I always wear molded in-ear monitors or earplugs. And I'm very, very careful. I have a lot of musician colleagues who have serious issues, and whether it's, and hearing loss is permanent, no matter how little loss it is, but it's permanent. So you can't fix that. And there's nothing worse. I have a few friends of mine who have lost hearing completely in one ear or are almost deaf altogether. There's musicians, famous musicians, some of them. So it's really tragic. So I'm very paranoid about that and very careful. So yeah, and I can only, trust me, if you're playing drums now for 5 years, maybe 10 years, maybe it's still okay to whack that snare drum, but give it another 5 years and something will go. You have to be very careful. So I can only recommend to you, always wear earplugs or those isolation headphones or in-ears, be careful. Yes?
All right, I have a TD9 drum kit myself. I can't afford a TD30 right now. And I'm just wondering, the cymbals on TD9 that I have right now, it's about 2 or 3 years old, and they're losing a lot of their response. How often would you say replace these electric triggers, the heads, any of that?
I'm really lucky, because when something goes wrong, I call up Tim and say, Tim, I need a new one. And Tim says, no, you can't have another one. Like, come on. So I don't really know. Honestly, I wouldn't know. Tim, this is something that I'll have to hand over to you. And of course, for your troubles, you'll get a free t-shirt. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Right, Tim?
You're right. Well, normally they don't, in 2 or 3 years, they don't start losing sensitivity. So they last a lot longer. So I don't know. The thing is, you don't really have to beat them too hard. But if they start going, I mean, you could, get them repaired or just break down and get another one. So the idea is just, you don't have to baby them, but you don't have to use, knock them to death. So that's the basic. You just take care of them. But they should last a long time.
What is it, TD9?
TD9. Come here at Sam Ash. Jonathan and James will make you a super deal.
Yeah, you know what? I've played the TD10, then the TD20, and then the TD20X, and the TD30. I've only had like the top of the range V drums, always, luckily. But I have to say, I've never had a problem at all. Recently, for the first time and I've been using the gear since 1990. When was the TD10 out? 1995? 97? Since 1997, I've endorsed Roland and used their gear all the time. You know, and I play them like I play acoustic drums with the same sort of, you know, oomph and energy. And for the first time at the Bonanza, I went through a drum head, a kick drum head. But I've had that drum head. Drew, I've probably had the TD20s. How long? The most recent TD20X? 3 years? 2 years? 3.5 years, something like that. So after 3.5 years of using it all the time, I went through a kick drum head. And that's the head, that's a mesh head. You know, obviously that's a replaceable part. I've never had any problems with any triggers, any breakage, nothing. And like I said, you know, I play with, you know, quite some intensity. So they're, you know, they're holding up really nicely. Yes, please.
Kind of a stupid question, I guess, probably a personal. You started when you were 5 years old and you had a Vienna choir instructor.
Not choir.
Well, I mean,
but,
sorry, Philharmonic,
yeah.
or, okay. Did you know the guy personally, or your family is musically inclined or something? Or why the drums? I mean, if you'd known a guy who was a French horn guy, would you be a French horn player today? Or, I mean,
no,
how did you pick the drums?
I saw a drummer on TV and it intrigued me, and it looked cool. The guy was, you know, it intrigued me because he obviously had a huge drum set. He counted in the band, and everybody looked at him, and he was in charge, and he seemed to be the boss of the whole operation. And he started the song with his giant drum fill over 19 toms. You know, it was 1970, whatever, 2 or 3. You know, so. And he was the only one in the band sitting down. Everybody else had to stand up. So I thought it was cool. And then, coincidentally, a couple days later, I saw a drummer play live in my local village, and I went up to the drum set, you know, on the bandstand, and I was 4. So, and I stood in front of the bass drum, and I watched the drummer. And the bass drum was about my size, you know, so I just felt that power. You know, he hit the kick drum, and I felt the air move, and I saw the giant, you know, drum set with the shiny chrome, and it was loud and it looked awesome. And he was playing with hands and feet, and it looked all very kind of active and interesting, like riding a bicycle in a way. And I was hooked, you know. And I bugged my mother immediately, and she said no for a few months, and I kept bugging her. And then she said, I have to learn a real instrument too, if I want to play the drums. So I had to learn piano at the same time. And she said, okay, if you learn piano, we'll also pay for your drum lessons. So I had to do both. And I started playing piano at the same time I started playing drums. And drums stuck. I mean, I still play piano today. You know, I had a teacher also for 10 years and all that when I was a kid, piano teacher. And it helped me a lot in general, you know, with my career, because I write and produce a lot of music on piano. So it was a good thing, but that's how it started. And the teacher was, this guy just happened to live in my local village. He worked in Vienna, and he was the, you know, the head percussionist of the Vienna Philharmonic Orchestra, but he just lived in my local village and also taught drums there. You know, on the 2 days off or whatever he had, whenever he was, you know, in town, he taught drums at the local music school. It was just, you know, by chance. We walked in and said, we would like to take drum lessons, and that was the guy. So I was just lucky, you know. Yes, one more? Okay.
One more question.
Okay.
How do you like the sensitivity of the cymbals on the TD30 versus
It's amazing.
other ones?
It's amazing. I mean, check this out. I'll go through like I'll just step through different sounds. I'll find a nice jazz cymbal sound. Hang on. That's nice. That's brushes, for example. Where's a good jazz kid? Hang on. Jazz combo. This is. feels. I love it. It's really, really nice. It feels totally realistic. Listen to this bell.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's great.
I notice your hi-hat rocks back and forth just like a real hi-hat as well.
It does, exactly. And I mean, it's really, there's nothing that feels unnatural or weird. And, you know, and whatever you play, in association with the sounds, it always feels right. It always feels the way it should feel. If you imagine this to be a giant 16-inch hi-hat, it feels like that. You know what I mean? You're hearing the sound, and although this is only a, whatever, 12-inch hi-hat or something, it feels great. The response, just the weight of the cymbal, the rebound, the response, always works with the sounds that you're hearing. So it always feels really... It always feels right. I love these, for example, the really sort of dry 70s sounds. Like this one, for example. Oh, I like this one. Where is it? Arena. No, that's not the one. Where is it? 70s? Hang on. Let me find it. I like this one. It's kind of a 70s sounding. Whatever it is,
awesome.
It always feels like it should. You know, great response. Feels totally natural. Love it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. There's one more. Okay, one last question. Over there.
One last question.
I have the TD20, and I agree about all the things you just said, but the only thing that I found that limited me, and I've seen you do it in some videos, and I know Bobby Jarzovic does it a lot too, is hitting cymbals from underneath.
Right.
And yeah, I don't know what
it works.
Well, I don't know why. It doesn't, for some reason when I do it, it just doesn't feel the same way like when you hit a real cymbal. It just feel
Sure,
like
it doesn't.
It's a different animal.
Of course, it doesn't. And it probably has to do with, of course, the weight, the fact that it's not the same material. It doesn't slide. You know, metal slides a little easier than the rubber along the stick on the upstroke. But sheer brute force is my, recommendation. Just
I love electronics. I'll never get away from acoustic. But
Sure.
when it comes to acoustic cymbals,
Sure, of course. You know, me too. But again, it does work if you use sheer brute force. So, okay, I'll play one more song. Okay, and then we have to go home, right? I will give stuff away, so stick around. Free stuff. I'll play another song from my band Stork. This one is called Changing Lanes. It's very complicated. I hope I remember it all. Uh-oh, I just lost all my tracks. This is really complicated because it has very difficult, sort of busy bass drum patterns in different time signatures, and they're fast and they're syncopated, and the song has probably 15 different time signatures, etc. So, I don't know why I just opened Skype. Quit. So, anyways, this one's called Changing Lanes. Thank you very much. Thank you all for coming. Thank you very much. Thank you to Roland. Thanks to Samesh, Troy, everybody here. And stick around for some free shirts and doodads. Thank you.